Welcome to the Tomorrow's World Today podcast. We sit down with experts, world-changing innovators, creators, and makers to explore how they're taking action to make tomorrow's world a better place for technology, science, innovation, sustainability, the arts, and more. On this episode, host George Davison, who is also the host of Tomorrow's World Today on the Science Channel, sits down with Reese Weber, Application Engineering Manager at 3M. Reese reflects on his journey from middle school to his career at 3M. He also discusses developing products that align with customer demands for sustainability and the importance of refining innovations over time, even if the process is initially messy and resource heavy.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Well, I think we probably should start our conversation with that big title of yours. What
Sure.
does that mean?
So essentially we have an entire team of application engineers at 3M globally. And really it's just a fancy name for all of us have an engineering background, and we focus specifically on helping customers with their applications. So me specifically, I work only on 3M VHP tapes. So I've got a lot of background in the 3M technology, but I know that there's a lot of customers that maybe have zero background in even adhesives in general, but they might be thinking about using a tape in their design. So I'm there specifically to help them in their design, making sure they use the right tape, the right design geometries even, and as we go through that design process, helping them even apply the tape and even training their team sometimes.
Wow, that's interesting. So you get to talk to customers, ask lots of questions.
Yes.
Use your observational skills, right? And then try to come up with ideas on how to best help them apply your materials to have a great outcome of their product in the end, right?
Yeah, you've got it. And honestly, like, the best advice ever given to me was you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? It's listening to those people and trying to learn more about them through your observational skills.
Nice. What's a great way to say it? One of my mentors used to tell me that when I was a youngster too.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen twice as much as you talk.
You've got it. A good way to live life, right?
Right. All right, so let's take the audience back if we could. Like, before we were probably born, or at least me. No, not you, at least. Tell us about these founders at 3M. Who were these people? How did this company get started?
Yeah, definitely before all of us were born. I can confidently say that. So the 3M company itself was actually formed. The 3Ms were Minnesota and Mining and Manufacturing. Essentially, they wanted to start to mine this mineral called corundum, essentially meant for abrasives and sandpapers.
Okay.
But it was almost, what I would call a complete disaster and failure from the start. The mineral reserves that they were trying to go for were not corundum. It was actually a completely different mineral that's horrible for abrasives. So somehow they continued to go, and over the next 20 years or so, really some core tenets of what the company is about, talking to the customer and just really hiring good people and letting them go, really were developed. So we started in working in abrasives, developed the first wet abrasive called wet or dry sandpaper, which was revolutionary at the time.
Right.
And then gradually even used that to develop Scotch tape when one of our product developers was just observing these automobile manufacturers having difficulties creating two-tone paint vehicles.
So you have abrasion, right? So you can have sandpaper that is dry to dry.
Yep.
And then you have sandpaper that goes underwater that you can smooth things off.
And
but
so
also adhesive. So you're removing material and you're sticking material to each other.
Yes, and there's a little bit more nuance to this in general, but if you think about what's the difference between a sandpaper and a tape is sandpaper without the mineral.
Oh,
It's
that's
essentially
a great way to look at it.
paper and adhesive.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice. So that's the beginning of the 3M Corporation.
Yes, and that was still in the 1920s. So 100 years of innovation since, we've created quite a bit more. But from humble beginnings, almost disastrous beginnings to what we are today.
All right. Well, that's great stuff. So we've learned a little bit about the background of the company, a little bit about what it means to be an engineer like yourself at the 3M company. I'm curious, is 3M involved in helping, schools like in any way to help them understand 3M, or maybe an innovation mindset in any way?
Definitely, and we realize that this is incredibly important too, because as a company, that some of our bread and butter, if you will, is adhesives. These are not materials that are talked about, or that anyone even going up through basic chemistry courses to university learn about in the first place. So we realize that it's very important to talk to people early, get them interested in the STEM education fields, science and engineering, and just understand how fulfilling that can be, and then of course bring in our products later on.
Right. So learning about how to use your mind and your hands to create things is an important part of a career if you were to select a 3M type of company.
Yeah, incredibly important. And honestly, not even just in scientific fields, if you will. That scientific mindset of almost trial and error, right? Like trying a bunch of different variables is just helpful for life in general, if you will, right? You need to try things out, experiment on yourself to learn what you like.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we kind of gravitate to the things we feel more drawn to.
Yep.
From my perspective, it's how many things can I get to see and learn about, because maybe I'll find something that would interest me, But around here, we fail a lot. And people think, oh, you're so, everybody's so successful. Well, we are, but only because we're willing to try again.
Exactly.
Right? And it does take effort to get back up and try again. And I imagine, just based on how your story started this morning, that having an abrasive product that didn't work all that great, and somehow today you're how many $1 billion a year is 3M Corporation?
Yeah, 30-some billion last time I checked. 90,000-ish employees across the world. It's crazy, honestly.
Isn't that amazing? And it's in about 100 and how many years would you say?
Since we were created?
Yes.
I mean, about 120, almost exactly to the year, if my 1902 is correct.
So we're looking at about 120 years. We went from 0 sales to billions, with thousands and thousands of employees, and that's just a beautiful thing. It really lets people build a wonderful life for them and their families. My hat's off to you, everybody, you and everybody else at 3M. Great work.
Thank you. I can't take too much credit for that, but I'll take what I can.
Well, hey, you're a part of their story now.
Exactly.
So it's nice to see the next generation coming along. So let's see here. I have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
See if I can stump you today. But did you have any mentors when you were younger that helped to shape your future?
Yeah, and it's, I don't know if it's like the most unique stories, if you will, but I think it's really, me growing up, like you mentioned, I always gravitated towards math and science. That's what came easy to me, if you will. And I think growing up, I don't know if I want to say my mindset was lazy or something, but it was like, I'm doing all of this schoolwork, I get it done in a couple of minutes, and then I want to relax, go play sports, hang out with friends, things like that. And the people that I really attribute to helping me with having maybe a more driven mindset, if you will, are really a couple specific teachers, at pivotal moments, 4th grade, 8th grade, that really just pushed me to broaden my mind, if you will, continue working instead of taking the easy route out, continue exploring different options and learning more about myself as I grew up. And I would say even once I got into university, I actually started working at 3M while I was in my sophomore year of college. And my very first job, I had a cubicle right outside the office of one of the guys who worked on the product development teams of both Command strips and Scotch Magic tape, so like the clear tape. So this person was on the team that developed sales in, the billions of dollars, and I'm sitting right next to him as a 19-year-old at the time.
Wow.
And it's just cool how the entire company kind of has this mindset of, it doesn't matter what level you are, I will have time on the calendar for you if you want to ask questions, whether it's personal, professional, technical. People are there to help you, and it's a really cool community that way.
That's wonderful. That's a different form of mentorship. it's wonderful to hear that they're thinking that way and that they apply time in the office for that kind of knowledge transfer, is the way we would call that around here. How about let's go back, if we could, to that
Sure.
math teacher and a couple of these teachers that made these impacts. What did they do? I mean, did they suggest to you, hey, you're good at this, can we stretch you a little more and
Yeah.
keep your interest going? I mean, what did they do exactly?
Yeah, so I had one specific math teacher. I think I was maybe in 7th or 8th grade, and just realized that I was maybe ahead of the curve of the rest of the class. So Mrs. Hartman, at the time, she actually took me out of class, spoke with my parents, and just said, "Hey, Reese is ahead of this. I think that what we can do is actually, in this time, have an independent study, if you will, and actually start teaching the concepts of, algebra 1 and 2, which at that time, if I'm a 7th or 8th grader, those were 9th and 10th grade classes. She helped me get ahead in these classes, pass all of the tests to be able to skip some of these courses in high school, just to maybe give me extra time to, advance myself further in high school. And it was something that's maybe small, but right, when you see someone that you look up to investing that time
Yes.
into you, it's really inspiring, and it makes you not want to let that person down, right? I want to crush learning this. I'm going to pass it because she saw that potential in me.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few teachers like that too that I think got me where I am today because of that mindset and stretching me all the time. Well, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing some
Yeah,
of that
thanks for
history.
asking.
Could you touch a little bit on, let's say some things in middle school that happened to you or high school that happened to you?
Yep.
I mean, what are some of the things that you really struggle with or didn't do so well with, but hey, you still got to where you are. So you didn't dwell on the negative, did you? You figured out a way to get here.
Yes, yeah. That's a good question, and there's a reason I focused on math and science so far, which is really just, half of the curriculum, if even. All of those classes around language arts, grammar, reading, etc., I hated growing up. And just everyone's wired differently because someone loves those classes, but as you said, it was, these are still things that you need, and you maybe don't realize at the time how important communication skills are. And I really wish maybe it was phrased up to me at that moment of, this isn't, we're not going through different, gerunds, different parts of the language just to bore you. It's to make you be able to communicate later in life, because it doesn't really matter how smart you are in math or science or whatever it may be to this person. It's really about, if you can't communicate yourself, that part almost doesn't matter.
At 3M, jobs in communication. What kind of jobs are in the field of communication at a place like 3M?
Yeah. I mean, first off, I'm going to say that every job, communication is probably the most important skill you have. But to your question, I think any job, whether it's in, we've got corporate communications people that are working, if you see, 3M in the news, these people have likely worked on, whether it's a PowerPoint deck or a specific press release, and focused on writing those properly. Or it's even everyone in the field of sales, if you will. I think communication is what they have to do best.
Right.
Of working to, with whether it's through a distributor, an end user, understanding what those people want, making sure that it's something simple as getting back to this person through email or through voicemail. Without that communication piece, people don't really want to associate with you.
Right. So that's interesting. So that, Reese, eventually you found yourself educated with a certain amount of knowledge, and you decided, hey, I want to go work at this 3M company. How did that come to be?
Yeah, not a snap of the fingers, if you will.
Okay.
It's something that took a little while, and I'm honestly very happy that it did. I think probably a lot of younger people can associate becoming an adult, you don't all of a sudden know what you want to do. And I think honestly, the entire journey, even where I'm at now, is figuring out what you like, and maybe narrowing down and whittling down what you don't. I still don't have a great idea of what I want to do, but it's about finding fulfillment. So to get back to at least my specific journey, I mentioned that I was good at math and science, so I figured going into college, I still didn't really have an idea what I want to do. I just knew I wanted to focus in there. So I looked at the field of engineering in general, just thinking of, I don't know exactly what, but I know engineering can be so broadly used. There are engineers at all of these different companies, and at least if you get to learn that background, that can be very helpful, and then you can switch between these engineering companies. So anyway, I went into school as a chemical engineering undergrad. In chemical engineering at the University of Minnesota, where I went, at least it was very highly regarded to go into research, which essentially puts you down the path of getting PhD, doctorate, going into like leading R&D. So my freshman year, I email a bunch of professors, ask like, hey, do you have like spots on your research team? I think I emailed about 20 different professors and got declined like one by one. Hey, the team's full, the team's full, the team's full. And it wasn't because they didn't want me. There's only so many people. Eventually, I finally did find a research job, thankfully. I get into this. I'm working on essentially adding what's called nanocomposites into polymer blends. So essentially putting small particles into something that already exists and seeing if it changes the properties. We didn't exactly know what it would be used for, but this is research, right? You're trying to do something that's new and see how it applies later. I get into this after working very hard to get this research position, and I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the job, I realize I hate it. It's just not for me. And there's people that are amazing at it, but every single time for this research and development, it takes an incredible amount of time, and sometimes you're doing the exact same thing hundreds of times without success or without the change in properties. And I think you mentioned that you get bored easily. I also got bored quickly in this role for research and development, and I'm thinking that this is the pinnacle of chemical engineering, and I'm wondering, have I gone horribly wrong? Am I going down the wrong path? Things like that. Luckily, I think I already mentioned that I did start at 3M my sophomore year. I noticed that, hey, if I don't like research, let's pick out the things that I might like. I like working on stuff that's cutting edge. I maybe don't like the repetition quite as much. So I know that in industry, like 3M's a company in there, let's see what sort of jobs that they have for someone that might be working in college. And luckily they have this position called a technical aid, where it's, they pay college students to work there part-time, extremely flexible, and you can come in and actually work with these product developers and help them test their new products. So I'm working on something that's far more tangible now. At this time I was working on different masking tape adhesives, masking tape backing, so I can actually start to understand where this is applied in the end, and just having that knowledge and actually doing some of these testing, whether it's peel adhesion, tensile and elongation, having that tangible effect, and working with these developers who have been there for 10, 20, 30 years was just far more stimulating to me.
That's really a good way to say it. The things that stimulate us, it's easier to work in those environments, isn't it?
Exactly. And really you may not have any clue without trying. So I'm so happy I tried something and learned that I hated it first, because that rules out that whole portion instead of getting to it later.
Yeah, I think that the idea of what you mentioned earlier too is that exploring around in these different fields, trying to find out what does stimulate you. So I'm not surprised you used that word, because as a chemical engineer, stimulus is a common word. So,
absolutely.
so good stuff there. All right, so Reese, if there was one thing that you could redo in high school, what would it be?
I wish that I just had all of this understanding of the trial and error earlier. I think throughout school I kind of did what was maybe expected of me, right? Of like, hey, this is you take AP World Geography, you take AP Calculus, this is what's expected of you. And I just kind of did it blindly without taking a step back and maybe evaluating what I thought was most important. I wish I would have focused on things a little bit earlier to maybe have more of an idea, more of a defined path to take earlier in life, instead of maybe having to learn some of these lessons later.
I see. So if you did go back in time and you talked to yourself back then, would you have said something like, hey, take a moment and think about how this might affect you in a going forward kind of way, so that you can get more serious about a subject? Is that what I kind of heard you say? Or
yeah, I think take time to actually be introspective for a moment. It's very worthwhile to take the time, maybe step away,
right.
Really take time to think about what you want to do yourself.
So true. Good advice. All right. So what type of opportunities exist for innovators if they were to go to the 3M company?
Yes, so 3M, will specifically actually works with young scientists, and there's actually like different mentorships where young scientists can be paired with a 3M product developer, maybe someone that just works in the lab.
Right.
and actually go through these different science competitions, right? So almost like a science fair, but with a grown-up helper, if you will.
Nice. So you have somebody helping you along. It's like a science mentor?
Exactly, right?
Oh.
And while it may seem like it's just focused on the specific project you might be working on, right? This person's also there to be a mentor for any other questions you might have.
That's great.
And whether it's with 3M or any company that does this outreach, I think speaking to different people who are in different areas, even if it's outside of STEM, if that's what someone may be, more stimulated by, getting these different perspectives from people who work in these different lives can help influence your decisions.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I didn't know that you had that initiative at 3M.
Yeah.
Somebody's really leading the dialogue on that one.
Absolutely.
I love hearing stuff like that. Corporate responsibility and helping to bring up our youth. It's a big thing that needs to be done.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I wish I knew about it when I was a young scientist level age.
Right. I do too. All right, so let's see here. Do you believe that anybody could be successful? Do you think that's inside everybody on the planet?
Absolutely. And the fact that success is such a large word, I think it's up to you to define that yourself. Success isn't necessarily what everyone else thinks about you. Success isn't always money. Success is finding out what drives you, what makes you want to wake up the next day, and working towards doing more of that.
Right. Well said. Thank you for that. Let's see here. What is one project that you think 3M or the industry that you're in, adhesives and abrasives, amongst others at 3M, that has struggled with, but you think is going to elevate humankind one day?
Sure. I think this whole concept of green sustainability is just a challenging one in general, but one that I think is so incredibly important for society,
right.
if you will. I think a lot of these companies, unfortunately always are thinking about profits, what is the stock price, things like this. And I wish there would just always be more focus on the greater good and making sure that we're not using up all of these, valuable resources, making sure that what we do is sustainable for the future and to make life sustainable in general, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the battle of sustainability, it's interesting to me, the evolution of innovation. It's like, as human beings, we create things, and it's such a messy process to create new things. And then over time, we refine, and eventually we get it right. I don't know, you could think back to the days of when IBM created that first big computer, and now it's like, it's like in this little tiny
it's in your
phone
pocket,
we carry around, But my goodness, that thing in the early days must have been just a major debacle on raw materials, but it's hard for us, I think, as human beings to see the end outcome that we need to get to early on. It's like it's this painful process. It's big, it's clunky, it's not really great, but we just keep trying, and that takes time and money to push forward through that. But I think you're right. I mean, sustainability, using our environment the right way, how do we get there? It's funny because I think adhesion or adhesive type products, and I'm just scratching away in my mind right now, looking at probably going back to trees and some of the sap, some of the liquid that exists inside a tree to create bonds, and then look at that. Well, how do you, if you cut down all those trees, how do we go beyond that? And
I think a lot of the raw materials for adhesives actually come from fossil fuels right now. So it's like, how can we get raw materials that come from these renewable resources? And maybe using some of those, there's always going to be trade-offs. There's trade-offs if you change in any raw material, right? So some things will be worse, but maybe focus on what's better. Where can we use that, right, and build from there?
Right. Yeah, I like the idea. I assume 3M's working on a more sustainable outcome to their tapes and whatnot.
Yes, and it's a huge goal for us, and I think we owe it to the world. I think all large companies owe it to everybody to have these sustainability goals and really focus on leaning into them and continuing that.
I think it's great too because it also drives innovation. I mean, it's like, why keep it this old way we used to do it? We can do better, right? And that's going to require what? A lot of young people coming up and going, I think I can do better than that. And they draw on the old knowledge with their rebellious younger, I'm going to figure it out. They couldn't,
I'm going to do it better than my parents, better than the other people. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I didn't want to do what my parents did. I'm a rebel that way. I'm an innovator. I want to make it better. So I think it's just part of the process.
Agreed.
Let's see here. So I think I may have asked you this question. You probably answered it already in another way. But what is the next big innovation coming into your industry? And I think you're going to say it's creating a more sustainable product line.
Yes, definitely. And part of what we're working on for the future is always like having that ideal in mind, right? Is we can't create a new product that's not sustainable. Right now, really what we're working for, especially in my 3M VHB world, is we want to move along with the customers. So their designs are changing, their materials are changing, hopefully to more sustainable materials, and they want to use more automation, robotics. So we need to make materials that keep up with that.
Interesting.
So even in this, upcoming episode, we're showing this 3M VHB extrudable tape, where instead of just like a tape format, now this can be extruded from robotics. So it can, almost be flexible to exactly what that end user needs for their design. It can be stretch released, so instead of scrapping materials, we can rework them. Even things along those lines add to the sustainability feature.
Well, that's great. Reese, I can't thank you enough for coming in here today.
I really appreciate it. This is such a fun thing to do.
Well, everybody, that's another edition. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tomorrow's World Today podcast. Join us next time as we continue to explore the worlds of inspiration, creation, innovation, and production. Discover more at tomorrowsworldtoday.com, connect with us on social media at TWT Explore, and find us wherever podcasts are available.